We got some great minds here. We need some breakfast to talk about everything going on. Let's go around and tell everybody that's going to see this who we are. Sean Wright.
Ted Anderson.
Rudkowski.
Sayward.
Robert Vaughn.
Mike Neitzel.
Todd Huffman.
Stewart Rhodes.
Will Johnson.
David Gerson.
Holly Hilden.
Danny Mason. David Crowley.
And Adam Kokesh.
Definitely. I think everybody kind of know what everybody else's bio is here. Does anybody want to bring up what maybe the most important topic is? One that we all agree on?
Liberty.
Liberty.
What about what's next after the Ron Paul campaign? That's what's on everybody's mind. What do you do with all these young college students who are behind Ron Paul? What do we do to keep them active? What should they be doing? What do we think we should be doing?
Is everybody still afraid to talk about post-Ron Paul liberty movement?
No, I'm not.
No.
That's why I'm going to Tampa. That's the whole point in going there.
No. It's not to celebrate Ron Paul. It's to move past Ron Paul.
It's to move past Ron Paul. Yeah. So I think Rand endorsing Romney was a gift to all of us, because it kind of frees us up from a cult of personality. It's not about one family or a dynasty. It's about liberty. So I think it was good.
I think you make a good point. I wrote an article in the Daily Call right after Rand did what he did, and I pointed out specifically that this is a movement, this is not a cult. Because a cult is not about principle, it's about a person. The movement is putting principle over person. After 2008 when Ron dropped out, now granted, I went to China, but some people, stuck it out for the Campaign for Liberty and whatnot. I eventually came back and did that. And it gave us what we have today, people running in local races and actually winning and changing.
Wait, Campaign for Liberty didn't give us that.
Well, not the whole. I'm talking about sticking to it and not falling into the trap of the cult and whatnot. So right now, and I would beg to differ a little bit that everything's over with the national convention. Just because I'm a national delegate and I'm holding out hope against hope that our efforts have not been in vain, despite the handwriting that may be on the wall. So I know I'm gonna make an optimist out of you yet, Ed. So,
well, I mean, I'm all for hope. That's an important thing. But when you allow a delusion to divert your attention from better causes, then it's a problem.
True, but I would consider it, the only delusion would be that if Ron were to become president, that he would change everything by himself. And I think that's what a lot of people call.
Well, no, specifically the delusion that he could get the nomination at this point. And I'm not saying that there isn't that 1 in a million chance that lightning's going to strike Mitt Romney and everybody else that the party would rather have as the nominee that they could credibly have in their line of succession down from Romney to the bottom of the list, which actually has Rand Paul well above Ron Paul on it, right? Then there's that chance. But if you're devoting resources to, at this point, anything other than specific things that work towards that, like actually phoning other delegates and giving them the pitch and saying you need to revolt at the RNC and not vote for Romney because you're pledged to, then there really isn't anything that can be done. And it's a specter of the Ron Paul presidency is a distraction.
I think one of the things you're talking about, it's what's going to happen down in Tampa is going to happen. Whatever happens down there, it's going to be up to the people that are inside that convention hall, who are delegates, and we won't know the outcome until there's an outcome. But I think Stewart says let's move forward. And in 2007, 2008, I ran the Ron Paul campaign in Los Angeles County. And what did we do afterwards? Well, we found this little old guy who's been on the Census Committee in Los Angeles County for 40 years. He says, why don't you run for the Census Committee? We went, what's that? All right? And so we got on the ballot. We had 26 write-in candidates because the Republican Party in LA County is so dysfunctional, and throughout the state, there was a lot of openings. So we actually took over LA County, and I was elected second vice chairman. We had 3 other people that worked on the Ron Paul campaign, and everybody else was on the Census Committee. I was on the executive board. Of course, the GOP couldn't handle that and came back 5 months later and moved us out, and we had a lawsuit. But in 2010, what did we do? We got 70 people to run, right? We got 60 people elected. This year we had over 150 people run. That's not including, that's just in LA County, that's not including the state. And that's just for the lowest base where they don't have to spend money, but they can get involved in the process. And why? Because in LA County and other counties, if you're a direct elected representative, you get to reach out to those other Republicans and give them something other than what they've been hearing.
Yeah,
You know?
and that's something across the country, and that's kind of Will's point, is that, I mean, everything builds on, every effort builds. Even though we lost in 2008, we didn't lose in all ways, right? We still had a victory in a sense because people got active, and now they're starting to take over their state party. Like here in Minnesota, you guys are taking over the state party, right? How many delegates did you get?
32.
32, right. So that's a good example. Yeah.
Well, one of the problems you've got with that, too, is Kurt Bills is endorsed by Ron Paul, and all the money people behind our GOP is not giving him money. So he's so far behind. Amy Klobuchar, they basically left him out there hanging without the financial support to run a real Senate campaign. And it's almost the GOP old power people are all mad because they're not going to Tampa, and they've basically cut him off from funds. So Kurt Bills gets elected, it's going to be grassroots people giving $10 at a time and going to his parades and actually getting information out. This party up here, the power brokers, were burned off, and they're going to then, instead of seeing the writing on the wall, all these young people that are up in St. Cloud to see Ron Paul, 1,300 young people, and about 20 old guys like me, most of us military vets. They've burned those people off. That's the lifeblood of the future of the Republican Party, but these people will not give up their power, and they're going to have it taken from them.
That sounds like we need accountability. You know, we gotta get the word out about people's voting records, and we gotta, stay on them. Like, you said you would do this, and then you did something else, and the general public, unfortunately, is apathetic and doesn't pay much attention because they're too distracted by Super Bowl and American Idol and whatnot. We need to, in my opinion, to keep that momentum of the youth that Ron Paul brought to the table, and grab that ball and run with it, because we're going to have to figure out a way to make politics not so boring for the younger generation. I think a lot of them are turned off by the process, the corruption, things like that. So and there's a lot of distractions. So it's an uphill battle. But if we can take that momentum, if we can get more candidates that are more charismatic, or if we can do what We Are Change style and get out there and hand out flyers and get people involved, have local meetup groups, do whatever we got to do to keep people at least focused long enough to keep the ball going. I mean,
well, I've been involved in the Republican Party since 1990. I just moved to Wright County. I bought a house up there in 2008, remodeled it, and then I became active in 2010. I went from being a neocon GOP. I almost had a fist fight with my son about George Bush. He's a huge liberal, so we probably would have had a fist fight anyway without George Bush. But as I started understanding what's really going on in our country and what's going on financially, my party, I was endorsed by the grassroots to run for Wright County Commissioner. My own party is running ads against me and raising money against me. Me and my wife were both Ron Paul delegates from Wright County. We put the most seats. We had 68 seats at the state convention. 54 Ron Paul delegates, and they are all the older people in our party are just totally burned off that they're not going to get to go on their vacation to Tampa. They've lost some of the perks because of the Ron Paul people. I sat there and watched 1,300 students up in St. Cloud, which in Minnesota is one of the most liberal cities. The Star and Tribune goes there to get polls when they want them slanted to the Democrats. And we were at a function yesterday. It was put on by Bradley Dean. Bradley Dean was burned off by the GOP, and in fact, the woman that runs the students, there's 200 young students at the St. Cloud State University. She was going to do a seminar with Bradley Dean, and he's been totally trashed by the Republican Party because he said Jesus Christ at a prayer at our house. Not one Republican stood up for him. But these people at the St. Cloud State University were told that they will never be active or have a job in the GOP by our new state GOP coordinator because they're going to invite Bradley Dean. And she prayed about it and said, we're inviting him anyway. So you've got 1,200 students up here to see Ron Paul, and the party is burning those people up.
So, I mean, just to give you an idea, this is what's going on. Not only just, this is like a local cosm that's going on in the national.
All over the place. Yeah.
And so why is Ron Paul being shunned out and pushed away? I mean, he couldn't even show up to the Minnesota State Convention last time around. Now he had a speaking position. So you're talking about what's going on. I mean, is this guy going to be president? He was president last year in 2008. He wouldn't have a magic wand to fix everything, you know. He'd be still fighting the same battle. This is what it's about. It's not necessarily whether Ron Paul becomes president of the United States. You got to realize the success is in what's happening with the parties and what's happening with the message and how the movement is moving forward.
Yeah.
You have lots of candidates that are winning and getting involved. You have your situation where you have you're taking on these lower positions to get the message pushed forward. You want to change this country. That's how it happens.
Like Will just won his primary, so he's going to be in the state senate race.
And you're talking about going on as a delegate. I'm a delegate too. I'm going out to vote for Ron Paul. Ron Paul might say, hey, I've negotiated a deal with Romney and this is what I want you to do. I'll follow his advice and I'll say, okay, if that's where you want me to go, that's
I
what
would
I'll
disagree
do.
with you on that one. But I understand what you're looking at a long-term picture, and I understand you're looking at that. You know, everybody has a line in the sand, you know, and mine is I view it like this: there's compromise and there's cooperation, right? Cooperation is when you work with other people for the same goal because you have the same principle, but maybe in other areas you don't. But you have the same principle here. Compromise to me is when you're making deals with people that, I mean, I wouldn't sit on the other side of the table at any point.
Deals with the devil.
Yeah, and what it's going to do is it's going to come back. Like right now, here's a really good example. Rand, right?
Well, Rand called me personally. I asked him, what did you do this for? It doesn't make sense. And he says, it depends upon which battle I want to fight. I want to have end the Fed, or he wanted to have audit the Fed. So he had to give something to get audit the Fed. That's how he did it.
Do you really think you're going to get that from the Senate?
I have, you know.
So he
honestly,
specifically said to you, I endorsed Romney so that I could get audit the Fed passed in the Senate.
A bill.
That's what he's looking for. He's looking to further the political cause. No, I'm not saying that was right.
Right, because it seems kind of silly that whether or not audit the Fed is going to pass in the Senate is kind of regardless of whether or not one particular senator, even the sponsor of it, has endorsed someone else. Either the momentum is going to be there and the pressure is going to be on 51 senators to say, yeah, we got to pass audit the Fed. They're not going to say, oh, well, Rand endorsed Romney, so you better vote for his bill. Like, there is a horse trading that happens, but that's not how it works. I mean, if he's really thinking that, you know, he didn't get a specific promise and that's what he's hoping, he's just hoping to gain general leverage, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, but Adam, you're not in Congress right now, and you're not fighting that battle. I don't think you have a clue as to what's going on in Washington D.C. as far as from sitting in there and being in the heat of the fire.
Well, I've been there. Here's what I'll say. What that reminds me of are the politicians who say, well, I have to vote for this, even though it's unconstitutional, to get this that I think is better. So I have to give something to get something. That's what I see. And it's the same thing. When you vote for an oath breaker, it makes you an oath breaker. Rand endorsing Romney is saying, I'm going to help support and put in place a man who is going to violate the Constitution. Now, he votes constitutionally on his votes on bills, but this is the same thing. You're voting for someone or supporting someone who is going to violate the Constitution. That's as much a violation of the oath as if you were to vote for a bill directly. It's unconstitutional.
Before we get too far off the topic of getting on the Rand Paul,
we should talk about Rand Paul.
I know, but I mean, but the real original. Let's get back to the original point is how do we keep the youth involved?
Well, that's a good question, though. When you got the supposed successor to Ron Paul violating his principles.
No, that's an important distinction. Different principles with Rand Paul. He's always made that clear. To say that Rand Paul is anything other
I mean violating Ron's principles.
Okay, that's
what
different.
I meant. Yeah.
That's different. I mean, because Ron Paul and Rand Paul are two different.
Oh, I know.
The father and son. He's got a son that's very liberal. You know,
right.
I've got children too. I've got some that are going to be going for Ron as well. You know, and I would.
No, I'm not blaming Ron for Rand. I'm just saying that people looked at him as the successor. I think that was a mistake.
Yes.
And obviously it was a mistake.
And he led the bond with that when he was first running for Senate, too.
Yeah.
Not that he ever lied, but I think he really led the movement on with that.
Ron Paul's a man of principle. I mean, I've been supporting Ron Paul since back in the 1980s when I became involved.
And Rand is not Ron.
They're two different people.
Oh,
Entirely.
Well, as far as liberal of principle, I think that's also
But
true.
the point that I'm trying to make here is that where we're winning is what you're talking about. And what you're talking about, it's gaining control of these local levels. These older people have to accept the fact that the younger people are going to be taking over the party because they're going to be getting old and dying. They're going to retire. They're going to be moving away.
But you can do that, like Will was saying, you can do that without compromising your principles. And voting for the lesser of two evils is how this country is in the place it's in right now. It's because they did that for decades.
Actually, the young people that I've talked to working for Youth for Paul and working in the colleges and worked on the campaigns in this last election are not going to they're not happy with what's going to happen, and they're not going to compromise their principles because they've got a taste of something. That is, they don't have to look at what their parents are. I'm voting for the lesser two evils. That's what we've always heard, that their parents. I am voting for the lesser two evils, so I'm voting for whether it's a Republican or a Democrat or
I'm voting for a party nominee.
They don't want to do that anymore. They're tired of that.
Yeah.
And this year, I got more young people, and what's going to take to get young people in as well is taking these young people who are not discouraged by what's happened in 2012 and keeping them involved. And like I said, we're not just taking over the local levels. That's very key to keep people moving into those positions. But it's also like these guys now. They're running for Congress. I ran for Congress in 2010. We got David Miller, who's running in the 32nd District against Grace Napolitano, who I ran against in 2010. And he's got a chance of winning. He's a Ron Paul guy. He's constitutional. We got people in the state assembly. It's a process of taking back your political power. And we got to understand and let them know, too, that they're not alone and you're not going to be abandoned. When we had our troubles in LA County, we felt abandoned, but we still pushed forward anyway because we knew we were going to continue building coalitions. Stewart Rhodes came out to our event in El Monte, I think in 2008, right, or 2009, when we had a candidate endorsement process with Shailene Nightingale, who was running for governor.
Oh yeah,
and that's what it takes, making coalitions. The people, Stewart Rhodes' organization does what it should be doing, and that means approaching people who are in power with authority of arrest and also people who are elected, right? And tell them that this is your oath, right? And it's going to be up to us to take back and live up to that oath. Is there horse trading going on right now? It doesn't have to be.
And then I can tell you, we're sitting in a room right here. Every single one of us has an idea of what the party is and constitutionality. It isn't necessarily the same. And even us sitting at this table have to meet with our minds, and we have to come up with ideas. And it's like one person says, "Oh no, that's not constitutional." The other person says, "Well, wait a minute, what about this piece? And what is constitutional? And how much of the Constitution is studied?" See, there's always going to be differences, even at this table. There's differences.
Yeah, but there's a core. The bedrock core is our Bill of Rights. And the bedrock core is what we agree that the government should never be able to do, like assassinate you because Barack Obama says so. You know, there's certain things that are so there's a common ground, whether they're left or right or whatever your persuasion is. The Bill of Rights is our common ground.
100 years ago, we could have been arguing about whether slavery was constitutional.
100 years ago?
150. Basic things like keeping and bear arms. That's a basic tenet that most people are probably agree
Stewart,
about.
you say left, right, whatever. No, that's really the deviations from even basic adherence to the Bill of Rights. You say there are lefties who think that the Second Amendment just is totally irrelevant because it's a bad idea.
I didn't say that. I'm saying that there's a common ground there. Hey, conservatives aren't consistent either. They don't even know what the Fourth Amendment is. It's like, what's that? You know, so they're inconsistent. But that's the only salvation I see we have is getting people to be consistent, at least on that bedrock. There's certain things that should be off the table that cannot be done to us. Certain fundamental liberties and protections of liberty, like jury trial, you know, as opposed to the Star Chamber of a friggin' panel of generals appointed by Barack Obama deciding to kill you. You know, there's certain things that any American should be able to agree on. If they don't agree on that, then they're a totalitarian. Then they're an absolute statist, and you're never going to be able to get them to do anything. But
You don't think it's futile trying to get an organization, namely the federal government, that's based on the premise of exploitation and violations of people's rights to follow its own rules? You don't think that in and of itself, compared to the broader paradigm shift to getting people to embrace the message of liberty, has a certain element of futility about it? Because when you say, we're going to get the government to go back to the Constitution.
No, I didn't say that. I said people. I said people. You get people to stand that bedrock. Okay. No one on this table is going to say, okay, I think it's okay for Barack Obama to assassinate American citizens. For us, that's off the table. We will not agree with that. We won't compromise on that. That's right. Right. So that's what we're saying is you can get more people to do that. I am going to go work on the guys in government, not the lawyers or the judges. That is futile. I'm going to go work on the guys with the guns, as you know, because they can be like us. If they switch on and become like a Ron Paul youth or somebody or an activist like we are, once they've switched on, they've lost them. Ideologically, they're never going to get them back. The only way they can get them to do anything after that is through fear. And it only works on some people, right? Not all men are going to be able to bend the knee for fear, right? What would you rather do? Stand and die, right? Yeah. Other guys in the Marine Corps, what were they like? Were they cowards or were they brave?
There's a mix.
There's a mix. But the ones that are brave, once they're switched on, they've lost them. The establishment and the powers that be, once we've turned them on to the truth, they're gone to them. Now they're going to be their intractable opponents to the death. And that's what we need to do, is grow more of that. Every Ron Paul youth out there, once they're switched on, that's why Ron Paul's campaign has an effect even after it dies, is that youth is lost now to the establishment. They've woken up. They've taken the friggin' pill. They've seen what the truth is, and they're never going to go back. And that's what scares the shit out of the establishment.
Would you say the same thing about Rand?
What's that?
Would you say that Rand is woken up?
No, I don't think so. I think Rand. Well, I think Rand was. I think he compromised.
How do you separate all of the people in the Ron Paul movement, people who are only engaged because of Ron Paul? How do you make them like you and not like Rand?
That's why Rand was a gift. What Rand did pissed off a lot of Ron Paul supporters, and it helped to ensure that we're not a cult of personality.
Rand Paul believes in the Constitution. Rand Paul believes in the Bill of Rights. How do you separate them?
How do I separate? Because like I said earlier, by endorsing someone, he's trying to say,
Ron Paul has endorsed people that aren't constitutional.
That was a mistake too. That was wrong also. That was a compromise of your values. I mean, I take a much harder line on it. Like I said, it's one thing to say, well, I vote for the Constitution, but I'm going to endorse an oath breaker.
Stuart, I'm trying to get you to admit that you're a voluntarist, anarchist.
Well, look, as long as we have a Constitution, I swore an oath to defend it, I'll defend it. If it is destroyed or made futile, or if people decide to throw it off, as is their right, then that's their decision.
All right, Stuart, as an oathkeeper, if someone were to say it's come time to abandon the constitutional government created by this monstrosity.
Because it is now violating its own purpose, right?
It's been doing that for a while
right.
now.
Oh, I know.
And if is your oath really to death? Is it really, or is it to principle? Because you told me, and we've had this conversation, that you do see the principle beyond the manifestation.
Oh, of course. The Constitution was just the method chosen by that generation to fulfill the ends of as declared in the Declaration of Independence of government. That was their method.
Stuart, what about prohibition? That was a constitutional amendment.
Right.
Which said that nobody could have a beer in this establishment.
But it was also an amendment that was done by a minority that had a very powerful influence over the
It's still a violation of liberty.
It's the Constitution.
It's still a violation of liberty. I'm not saying everything's
She couldn't vote.
Oh, I know. I never said that everything is constitutional. I never said that everything is constitutional is right or is in defense of liberty. I mean, you've had habeas suspension has been there, a power that's constitutional since the founding. I think it's wrong. I think it's ridiculous to have a habeas suspension clause. If I'd have been there, I'd opposed it. I never would have signed the Constitution because of it. So there's a difference between constitutional and right and wrong.
Okay, good. So at least you
draw
that.
Yeah, of course.
So which leaves you enough room to have a difference of opinion with somebody else about the Constitution.
Well, sure. I mean, we can look like I said when I used to work on Ron Paul's staff. We can have honest disagreements about what this document says. But the first threshold in his office, as you know, is it constitutional or not? After that, even if it is constitutional, the next question is does it advance liberty? And so he would still vote against something that, even if it was constitutional, it was still wrong. Congress might have the power to do it, like declare war, but he could say, well, I think this is wrong to go to war, and so you don't go. But the threshold for anybody in office is first it must be constitutional. I can't take action that's not constitutional if I've sworn an oath to defend the Constitution.
Roland, so the point of that line I was trying to get you on there was that look at the youth that you are talking about keeping invigorated and that we were asking as the original question. They're not looking at the Constitution as this magic document because they go, but isn't that how we got to where we are today?
Right.
And they're not reading just Ron Paul. That's the start. In a sense, Ron Paul is the gateway drug for them to reading Molyneux,
absolutely,
and Spooner, and Rothbard, and Mises.
And like Spooner said, this Constitution has either facilitated what has happened or it has failed to stop it.
There you go.
And so that's the truth.
So why would you argue for that for people that are coming into this movement?
Argue what?
For the Constitution.
Oh no! I'm not saying the Constitution is the end-all, be-all of freedom. It's the method chosen. And let's put it this way: the people that are in political power cannot step outside the Constitution. They cannot do that. The people can.
Okay, well, what do you mean by cannot? They do it all the time.
No, not legitimately.
Okay.
Not legitimately. Okay, they have no legal like the military.
Okay, so be more precise with that language.
Let's take the military for example.
All right.
I get people say, well, we should have a military coup. And I told them, where is the authority for the military to take over our government and rule us? That's for the frying pan into the fire. Would you agree?
Right, well, unless they just destroy the government.
But all of us here are the government.
No, so the people have the authority to do that.
Table is the government.
The people have the authority to do that as individuals, not anybody in a particular office. When they step outside the Constitution, they no longer, all they are is people after that. They're naked people with no power outside the Constitution.
Let's talk about
no legitimate power.
Oh, so if they step inside the paper, then they have power over us?
No, they have.
Now you're making the case.
No. They have no. That's not what I'm saying. We have a government that's supposed to be limited by the Constitution.
Right.
Now, obviously, it's gone way beyond that. The point is, though, the only legitimacy it ever had was the power given to it by the people themselves. Okay.
What power was that?
The power delegated to the national government, the Constitution.
Did the people do that?
Yes.
Well, let's get to the people.
Well, sure, the founding generation, sure, yeah. I mean,
how many?
I know, Spooner made that point a long time
many
ago.
of them?
I know.
Hey, Stewart, here, let's get to the people. The way the people make a vote is through Congress. We actually have a few people that run for Congress.
Exactly.
We've got Roberts running for Congress, Mike Neitzel's running for Congress, Will Johnson's running for Congress, David's running for Congress, Adams running for Congress. See, most of you guys was 2010 or prior, but what's the biggest thing that could have helped you guys get in? That's where the problem is.
We'll have a philosophical debate about
well, that's
NRC
easy.
later, I
Just for
guess.
running for office and trying to represent
I think it's important.
I think I was telling Luke the other thing about any kind of campaign, right?
Below the Constitution is the Declaration of Independence, and the people reserve the right to throw off even this government. They do have that right. Absolutely. But the people, not the military. Okay.
What can help? You need 4 things to win a campaign. 1, you need a candidate with heart who's going to stick it out, who's not going to bend and compromise on his principles. Because when people see that flip-flopping, or that, I say this one thing over in Glendale, but say another thing over in West Covina, they're going to go, oh, well, we don't want you anymore. They're pandering, right? Second thing you have to have is a plan. You've got to have a strategy.
Wait. You said you can't say one thing one place and go say different. I thought that was how you got elected these days.
Well, that's how some people get elected.
That's where I screwed up because I never did that. I look back and I said, "Oh, my opponent did that all the time."
That's all you had to do.
But that's what they do. But I can't do that. In all principle, I can't do it. Not everybody's principle. The second thing you need is a plan, right? A strategy. How are you gonna get that? Like we were talking. William saying, when I first got started involved in this, I was sign waving, right? Well, you can't sign wave. You're not talking to the voter, right? Most people don't understand in a 623,000 district of congressional district, only about 200,000 might vote. So you've got to be really targeted and have those voter lists and actually talk to those voters. Third thing you have to have is volunteers. People buy into the plan, right? that this is the message. This is the message we're going to give. And unfortunately, the fourth thing is you need funding. You got to have funding. You know, you got people that actually not only buy into the plan, will actually go after the thing. And you got to make it. This is not about me getting elected. This is about what you being an investor into the process of the Constitution or liberty. You know, like you said, will the Constitution survive? That piece of paper will survive, but will the principles, the words in it, survive? That's what we're really talking about. The Constitution, the papers, and the words going to survive, but will the principles behind it survive? And that's where I think these young people really get it. They want principled government.
Well, it's not just about politics. It's not just about government, though. It's not about just politics. I mean, there's a lot of things that are outside of should be outside of government. You know, voluntary association and civil society outside of government is critical. You know, and that's why we shouldn't get too focused on what's it take to win a race. You know, what really counts is just winning hearts and minds, and it's an info war. That's what it really is. You know.
Well,
So.
what was the best thing that could have helped you in your race, Mike?
Not running as a libertarian.
You ran as a liberal?
It's a libertarian.
It's a minority.
Yeah, I mean, I was going up
Your
against
race,
two
what's the one thing
establishments.
that really could have helped you more than anything to win for your seat?
Well, back in 2010, Adam and I were running at the same time. He was taking all my volunteers. So that didn't help. No. You know, it's an interesting thing to look at post-analysis on it. Adam, you got 13% of your primary?
No, just under 40%.
40%, okay. 40%, right? That's pretty close, actually.
That's a good.
I mean, you know, for the
That's a
first
good
time out of the
first try.
gate, especially running on what we're running.
Well, for my story, the story of my race, you have to see the tactical mistakes that we made in terms of assuming that we had the nomination because we had the support of the majority of county chairs. And this big tactical mistake, trusting the Republican establishment, you know?
Oh, I'm shocked to hear that.
You know, I went around, I talked to all the county chairs in the district and said, hey, I'm not running to represent the party, I'm running to represent the district. You can have me or you can have this liberal who's holding the seat right now, but a libertarian in this district might work. Let me have the shot. We keep the lane clear for me. And then we're like, yeah, sure. Nobody, like it's a losing race for Republicans every year. We throw up a sacrificial lamb. Go ahead. And then I ran for the middle, and I started running for the general election. And they said, well, I guess there are enough people that are pissed off that we can raise money from, so we're going to run someone against you now. And the corruption of the party in New Mexico is really centered around a consulting firm. And that's what kills me, is that we raised over $250,000 and had a lot of volunteers, and what sunk the campaign was someone saying, oh, a radical libertarian trying to run as a Republican, we can capitalize on this by running one of our good old boys against him, and we can suck a few $1,000s out of the New Mexico oil and gas industry for consulting. Because that was really it.
You hit the nail on the head. Consulting firms. I'm going to tell you what happened. And it started way back when, but got really bad in the 1970s when they started doing slate mailers, right? And they started building consultants. A candidate now in California, right? If he's got money and he's got some popularity, he's got some movement, they're going to bring a consultant from Sacramento and from Washington D.C. to help him in his campaign. Do we need their help? Maybe. But we have to break the back of these consultants and these things and build their own printers. Or look for people that are independent or not involved in the political process that we can get a good deal off of printing or consulting, or if we need a statistician. There's people out there really, when we had our trouble in LA County, there were people that were involved in the establishment who've been in the political process in California that came to me and say, this is what's going on, Robert. This is where they're taking the money out of one county and suck it into somebody's race or consulting fee instead of helping that county win elections, right? And that's what the whole process with, the basis is that's why we need to get involved, open up those books, expose it for what it is, and say, we don't need these consultants anymore. Yeah. Because you know what, in LA County, they haven't won a race from an incumbent Democrat in over 12 years. So obviously their consulting is what it's worth.
Yeah.
One of the things with my race that would have helped was it was a four-way primary. Okay, and the reason I mention this is because two of the other guys said that they believed almost the same thing I did. Okay, this is really important for us to understand going forward, because there's going to be a lot of people that will be hopefully running in a lot of races. And hopefully we'll have a couple Liberty people that'll have to decide who's gonna take it up. But you certainly have people that, if they believe the same thing, then if two people are still deciding to run, it's more about ego at that point than it is about getting the message out. There were two other guys, they were Tea Party guys, so they were kind of, you have to bring them along a little. Had they not been on the ballot, because they ended up dropping out, and I got endorsed, you know, but their names were still on the ballot, and they got 25% of the vote just because their names were on the ballot. And I got about 25%. The guy that won the primary, the establishment guy that raised, by the way, I didn't raise hardly any money, it was less than $5,000. And the guy that won, if they would have not been on the ballot, he only won by 500 votes in the primary. With him having all the money and all the endorsements. And that's what really woke me up to, holy cow, right? I had volunteers out there too in every single county. We were doing a lot of stuff. No money, and just, you know, it was all message.
This 2010 you're talking about?
Yeah, 2010. And then after that, if you're looking, what ended up happening, now some people believe if you don't win a race that it's completely, then it was just a waste of time. I don't believe that. Because when we ran that race, afterwards, there was, you know, we had just recently the caucus. We had the straw poll and the caucus, right? First in the nation, everybody's paying attention to that. CNN threw up a map that showed the counties in Iowa that were carried by Ron from the caucus, and most of them were in my district, the first district. Now that's not patting myself on the back. I ran a losing race with almost no money and just getting the message out. But what happened? A lot of GOP people that would have never gave us the time of day to listen came over and started getting converted. And they actually got involved and they started volunteering, you know, and they started throwing everything else in the background. It changed a lot, especially in my area. So now all we have, basically, we have right now a congressional race. And in the primary that we just had, there was another guy that was more well-funded. He was a wealthy individual. And he was more on the Liberty line because he'd been following the race the last time. And it took me about 3 months to endorse him, you know, because we had to go through things over and over. And he was really solid on the war and everything like that. So I ended up endorsing the guy. And now they're competing for our ideas. And that's really, you know, if I'm in there or if one of us is in there or whatever, if it's somebody else that carries our ideas in there, and then as we improve the candidates that get in there, that's really, we need to make them compete for us. Because otherwise, all they do is they compete, normally they compete for them, the guys, the consultant fees, the big money, but when they start finding out that we're the ones that actually turn out the votes, which is what happened in my district, now they're competing. Right now, this is funny because I endorsed David, like, what was it, like 3 weeks ago? Yeah, and some people were like, well, what's the point of endorsing someone outside your state, right? Well, get this. David's running against the guy that was the boss of the guy I ran against in 2010. And you guys know, it's like, you know, it might seem like sweet justice, right? Now, granted, I did it for strictly good reasons, okay? It wasn't like a vendetta thing, right? But it proved a point because I have not endorsed the guy that has already won the primary in my district, congressional candidate, who's asked me quite frequently, and him and his campaign manager. His campaign manager, by the way, was Rick Santorum's campaign manager for the state of Iowa. And who ended up winning the state of Iowa, the caucus? His campaign manager. Making a deal would be very profitable, I'll be honest, for myself with them. Because some people have been telling me I should be running for other higher offices. And I said, you know, that's all in the background. It's how is this message going to get out? If there's other people that are willing to listen to our message and come along and challenge these other people, so be it. And so right now, I have this guy, they just put up a new platform. They didn't have before in our congressional district, 9 new planks of their new beliefs, right? They're against the National Defense Authorization Act. Yeah, I mean, all this stuff that is common sense, you know, and it's kind of popular, you know, end the Fed, all this stuff. 2 years ago, after I lost the primary to that same guy who's running right now, the next day we had a meeting, and he said, what will it take to get your endorsement? This is important to know, because this is how this works. He said, what will it take to get your endorsement? And I said, all right, me and my campaign manager were sitting there. I wrote on a piece of paper about 9 or 10 different things. It wasn't what position I want or anything like this. It was, you got to take a serious look at this stuff. You know, Federal Reserve, the 1,200 agencies that are in the federal government, and, you know, all this stuff.
Patriot Act.
Yeah, Patriot Act, and I had a list. And I said, okay, this is my list. What can you give me, right? I'm being honest. I'm greedy for liberty, is what it is. And so he looked at it, he's like, well, we might be able to look at the Federal Reserve one, possibly. And I was like, okay. He's like, but I don't know a whole lot about it. Do you think you could give it to me in a day or two? I'm like, dude, it's gonna take a lot longer than that. Here's some books, you know. And I said, out of 10 items, you're only gonna possibly give me a maybe one. There's no way you're getting endorsement, right? And they said, here's what they said 2 years ago. They said, well, all right, that's fine. You know, we'll be fine. And I told them 2 years ago, and I'm glad this is on record because they already know this. They said, you guys aren't gonna win the general like this. And now, granted, they didn't look at me as a very strong candidate in the primary, obviously, because no funders and all this kind of stuff. But I knew it was going to be close, and it was. They lost by about 1.5%. And you know, they lost by 4,000 votes. And there was a write-in candidate, and there was some. There was a write-in candidate. There was also a third person on the ballot. And I got 6,000 votes in my primary. Not a whole lot, but I got 6,000 votes. You know how many votes? He lost by 4,000. You know how many votes were given to the other guy? 6,000. And they pointed this out to me there. They were like, huh, you know, they were like, yeah, they were like, wow, who would have thought such a little number makes such a big difference? Yeah. And that's why when people get a little bit distracted with, you know, you look at those primary numbers and like the Liberty is like 10% or less. Yeah, that might not be a huge number, but one, we have all the passion. And two, once we understand how the process works, 10% or less determines races. Yeah. Really close.
And a good example of that is in Montana. Last Senate race was Conrad Burns, an oath-breaking Republican, who lost the Liberty vote. Libertarians, Constitution Party people, Constitution in the Republican Party would not vote for him. They voted for Libertarian instead. And he lost by about a 10% margin. The Libertarian got 12% of the vote. So he lost the Liberty vote. That's why John Tester, the Democrat, beat him. And that's what we told the Republicans. You lost the Liberty vote. And the same thing's going to happen this time around. I told Denny Rayburg, who's running against John Tester for the Senate, I said, you're going to lose because we will not vote for you. And so the Liberty vote can scorched earth against the GOP. When they run an oath breaker, we can say, until you run a Liberty candidate, you're not going to hold office. Yep. And hold their feet to the fire that way.
Our number one weakness
which the politicians are starting to understand that.
Yeah.
Right.
Minnesota certainly does. I don't know if the entire United States does because it didn't go the same direction Minnesota did. But what's going on in the Republican Party of Minnesota is they understand that there's a voice here. There's an electoral. We have clout.
A block.
Exactly.
Liberty block.
And we're here. I mean, just John Klein called, one of his supporters called me yesterday. Are you going to make it out to the primary? There's somebody running against it.
They can't win without us. And going back to Rand, that's why I don't like what Rand did, because that is kind of driving a stake into the heart of this strategy.
I don't think anybody at this table likes what Rand did.
But I'm saying, just philosophically though, I'm just saying, or going practically, going forward, if you're going to be a bloc that says unless you propose Liberty candidates, you will lose, that has to be the stand we take, because otherwise we have no power at all.
Yep.
Right?
And I think the point that he made, it's the most important point here. It's not about Rand and Ron. It's about the ideas that Ron Paul has brought to the national conscience. The Fed, our Constitution. I look at this table compared to a GOP table. We've got a lot of young people here. We've got young people running for Congress. We've got young people that are doing videos. This is the people right here that those ideas cannot be taken away from. He talked to a couple of vets over at the Airborne All-Division roast over at the Air Force Base, just came back from Iraq. Now, he approached them in a whole different way. Now, these guys both will, I'm positive, will uphold their oath.
They were interesting. One of them was like, I don't understand why we keep giving all this money to Israel. Let Israel take care of itself. And he just came back from Iraq. I was like, this is kind of weird,
Yeah.
It was strange.
Because that makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes sense to everybody except for perhaps somebody who is Jewish and supporting Israel or
neocons who want to have war.
When I ran my race,
I mean, it scares the crap out of my Jewish friends to even think about that. The United States not supporting them, having all that air of pressure.
I don't mind us selling them our surplus arms and stuff. I mean, that's, obviously we're the military-industrial complex can do that. It's giving them extra cash and then giving cash to their enemies and arms to their enemies as well. So we have to make it. We have to say. Stop the insanity and cut everybody off and say, you know what, I'm sorry.
Can't afford it anyway.
If everybody of Jewish persuasion or Hebrew persuasion wanted to give money to Israel, I'm not going to stop them. They can they can raise money. I know they got money.
Well, I can tell you right now, there are more Arabs coming to the United States that are voters than there are Israelis. So
Well, hopefully we can, get them constitutionalized.
As long as we can get them to speak English, we'll be okay.
Well,
one of the points about Ron Paul.
Actually, they do well.
Everybody comes to me and goes, "Oh, but what about his foreign policy?" Just skim it. If we adopt his financial policies, the foreign policy will take care of itself because we won't have money anymore to afford 800 bases and wars
You're
everywhere
not going to get it no matter what,
because
right?
we'll be balancing our budget. We'll probably be on a gold and silver standard. So don't even argue with people about the foreign policy because it's totally irrelevant if you adopt what he's talking about in his financial policy.
well, it comes down to what I was talking about.
Exactly.
It is when you put a politician and a printing press in the same room, they're going to run that printing press and send it to every country in the world and take it out of the pockets of people that saved it and worked so hard for it. So if you want to stop all this nonsense, what you're talking about is insanity.
Right.
The only way you're ever going to stop that insanity is you're going to have to stop that printing press dead in its tracks. And it could be any one of us sitting there negotiating with them. It's just like Ron Paul says. You have a negotiation for welfare, you have a negotiation for warfare, and they don't have a budget to restrain themselves, and they just end up doing both. Right. And you're going to continue to get that. The only way you're going to stop that is to teach the politician, or better yet, teach the people that vote for the politician, that the reason why we have this insanity is because they're not held accountable, period.
Yeah, I think a really good thing to remember is when we're talking to people that aren't in our circles, like we're kind of, a lot of the stuff we all know, we're preaching the choir, and also when we go to Liberty and stuff, generally speaking, 80% of what we say, people are already going to know, and they should, and we're reinforcing and firing them up. When we're talking to people that don't have this level of knowledge, and in some ways this level of heart, to be honest, sometimes knowing the arguments that are going to be made and having it ready ahead of time are important. For example, one of the biggest ones that's been mentioned several times today was the foreign policy. When I ran, and I was talking to like the GOP people, which is one of the most difficult ones, I phrased it this way, because now granted I happen to have had a benefit from being in the Navy, so they look at that aspect and it helps for them to listen. But when I start talking about foreign policy, I say, listen, who here, and I did this at one of my fundraisers, I said, who here is against socialism? And they all raised their hand, right? And I said, okay, so we all know that Europe is a socialist, basically the Eurozone is all socialist. Like, yeah, and I'm like, they have socialized healthcare and they thumb their nose at us because we don't have it and they're so great. And like, yeah, and I'm like, well, do they have their own, do they pay for their own Department of Defense really? I mean, we have military bases over there and we pretty much subsidize their Department of Defense. And then they pause and they're like, yeah, and I'm like, so why should we be subsidizing socialism? And they're like, yeah, and I'm like, let's just take our base out and make them pay for their own. And they're like, yeah, and these are people that I would not have gotten otherwise. Yeah. And they're like, you know what, no subsidizing socialism. So if you allow, and it gets to a bigger point of not allowing them to frame the debate. When they frame the debate, they say isolationist. So it's like, okay, wait, let's back up. Subsidizing socialism, that's you guys. Oh, well, I don't want to do that. And it's the same with, even on the Democratic side, when like the bailout stuff, right, or helping, all that kind of stuff. Bring them up to that, and then when they say, well, maybe things too big to fail, need assistance, and I use the inverse of that catchphrase. I say, well, listen, if something's too big to fail, then that means that something is too small to succeed, meaning myself or the small businesses. That's really what you're saying. And then they go, oh, well, I didn't think of it that way. So understanding where they're coming from and then changing even the wording to the debate will actually, people that aren't as close as we are, will help them to come along. If you can get a person on one principle, and now some people have this, they have one principle that they care about. They don't care about anything else. They just care about guns. They don't care about foreign policy. They just care about guns. You get them on that one principle, you can walk them backwards through everything else. Yeah. Only if they're strong in one principle. Because they have to. Otherwise, if a person doesn't have a strong principle, then it's like trying to nail jelly.
I get that. Yeah. That's what we do with Oathkeepers. That's why number one on the list is we will not disarm the American people. Not because that's the biggest threat. Number three is the biggest threat. It's the best eye catcher and the best window into conservative because they don't care about anything else. They still care about that and say, okay, take that passion and that commitment you have for that. But what about the rest of the Bill of Rights? So yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, we carry that right into how do we get that message to all the people.
And that goes to David and Jordan.
Jordan
and Luke. Yeah.
Right here, so I want to hear from you guys, that are out there doing these videos, doing the music, doing the movies and stuff. I mean, what's the best contribution to be able to wake up the wide audience. I mean, through art.
Tell us what you're doing and how that fits in with all of this.
You guys are talking about harnessing the youth, right? We all know what kind of system we're raised under. You know, TV generation. We're raised by Xboxes and stuff. Essentially, we're still living in the failed social experiment of the '60s, right? I mean, it was a response to the military-industrial complex that we saw for good or for bad, right? Eventually, it became like such a polarized debate. Like either you're for the wars or you're just peace and love, man, right?
Oh, okay.
And it essentially destroyed absolutes, and what you're seeing is that dissolve, and we're seeing a stratification of those who are part of the system and those who want to grow out of it. That's why the youth are seeking absolutes. They're gravitating toward radical Islam in large numbers.
Or radical libertarianism. They're not gravitating towards constitutionalism. They're gravitating towards voluntarism.
Well, some of them are going towards like the black bloc type stuff too. So
that's not anarchy. That's non-proprietarian. We figured out a way to reframe that to separate voluntarist anarcho-capitalism from the lefties. It's
but David, the point is
anarchists.
What were you trying to say? What was your point?
Ron Paul is certainly bringing these issues to light, revealing that national consciousness evolution, as it were. So. I guess the most I can do is, you're right, you guys are like talking to the choir. It's a very strong, very powerful choir, we can agree. But you're singing the same tunes, right? And what we can do as artists, I imagine, is put this in words that they don't expect to hear. Maybe adding volume to the voice of liberty, right? I mean, people are going to go to a movie, and maybe they'll go see Grace Day because they saw the poster. They're not ready to defend against that message.
Right. Well, like Hunger Games. Hunger Games kind of has a pretty insidious liberty message inside of it.
So what we're trying to do is something that hasn't been done because of the mainstream domination of art, is that the artists have not sufficiently represented the zeitgeist, right? What we're seeing now is that people are ready for absolutes, they're ready to hear the message of liberty, but artists are not doing that until very recently, I imagine.
But also, I think one of the biggest things too is actually presenting the alternative reality that could actually happen. I mean, you know what I mean? So that's the biggest thing. So people can't really, especially the younger generation, be lazy. They're just overstimulated. But do it away where we're not shoving it down the throat. And that's the biggest thing. Just a chance to
they think it's entertainment, but they don't know you're actually brainwashing them.
At the same time, they're going to take away, pick and choose what they want. Right. But I think that's one of the most powerful mediums to reach people on a whole without isolating ourselves or what we're actually doing.
Well, like David said, we're in a mass education, or we're in a huge popular culture of just entertainment, right? So it's all everybody does. They don't read books. Like we were saying before, we got in there. They're not going to read Ayn Rand's nonfiction, but they might have read her, her Atlas Shrugged or something. So what you're doing is the same kind of thing, right? You got to.
Conscious is a powerful thing. Whatever you're involved, whatever goes in comes out, right? And so far, it's been nothing but the crap you get from the commercial mainstream. Right. A movie like ours will probably never be widely accepted by the mainstream.
The reason I like your guys so much is because everything I see that comes out that's new, like USA and all this other stuff, every series, every movie, it's always glorifying the secret intelligence communities. I was in intelligence. It's ridiculous. This one with this lady that's supposed to be some interrogator. Everything that's bad, they come out and they're like, hey, look, this is actually a cool way to spin it. And there's no exception to the rule on that stuff. Now, granted, all those TV shows and everything somewhat subsidized, so it kind of makes sense the way they're going. But it's good to see a counter to it.
I think to kind of add what you just said, I think the biggest reason is just reinforcing to the public that it's okay to accept really what's going on, and I think that's a shame. It's a bunch of shit.
Well, it's a counter message, like you said, because you watch the Dark Knight series and you see some rich guy who's fighting for your interests because you are powerless, and to do so, you've got to give up your liberties. In small degrees, and this is absorbed by the subconscious, and this is what people tend to think about themselves. I'm powerless. Look how many superhero movie remakes have there been in the past 10 years? Superheroes. Why is there an infatuation with that? And what about like the everyman doing something? Well, even if it is tiny and ugly, like a political campaign, grassroots style, that's not glamorous.
Yeah. Well, it's like when I talk to people, sometimes I use, I read the Bible. I actually read the Bible. And there's a passage in there that I use all the time when I'm talking to people. And what you're saying is people have power, right? Have no power. Well, it says God has not given us a spirit of fear, but power, love, and a sound mind. Power to do the Creator's will. of whatever your creator is. It's a creation. We're always recreating ourselves, right? Love, which means we have compassion for our enemies as well as our people that we truly love. And a sound mind, you know the difference between, like you said, right and wrong, black and white. There is evil in this world, and we see it all the time. And we get immune to it because they're constantly injecting it in our art, in their music, and in our media. They're constantly showing us the evil. They never show the good things about, very once in a while they show the cat getting pulled out of the tree or somebody, being saved. But there's a lot more of those stories out there, truly are, than I saw what the evil, what they focus on. And that's what it is.
You're describing the difference between the white state and the black state.
So fear is a spirit, and they're trying to infuse that into you. It's like a possession.
So do you see what?
How we immerse in this black state where all they see is evil, and so they become immune to it, as you said. The natural inverse of that is to show that no, you're a powerful, sentient being, and you have all this power based on the things that you said the Creator gave us, right? Well, gray state is not about showing that either, because we still exist in this physical plane, in this paradigm in which we are subject to other things. The question then becomes the nature of coercion, so the non-aggression principle and all that worked in. The gray state will surprise you because it's not saying, like, wake up and throw off your shackles. It's saying you're going down with the ship, how are you going to get rid of it?
You're going down with the ship?
It's not a happy message.
Isn't the world what it is, what we make of it?
That's what we allow.
And that's what with the liberty movement is. We are changing. It's moving back towards that. And I think that if we continue with this, and look at it as a war, it's a campaign, right? Like in a political campaign, a war campaign, it's a campaign, and we're campaign for. That's why they say campaign for liberty, right? It's a constant reinventing and infusing yourself into those areas. And what we're really talking about here is ideology, right? Tyranny is the mainstream drug of choice for everybody, and even we can be tyrannous in liberty. It's like, you got to have liberty. Well, maybe they like being in prison. I don't know.
So, David, you're saying though is that the message is that it's not going to be fluffy little clouds and bunny rabbits. We're going to go through some serious. So
you're saying I believe the gray state will occur?
No, I'm asking you.
Well, I think we are doomed to some sort of. I think it's been too long since the last revolution. I think our generations are incapable of sustained guerrilla combat. I think we're facing some very real possibilities. I mean, screw the number of guns we have. Can we live without food and electricity for more than a couple months?
There are still some people in this country that have that kind of toughness.
There are plenty. And we will, the litmus test will still be applied. And we will find out who those people are. But that doesn't mean that 80% of the population will die trying. These are the realisms that I'm exploring through Gray State. Not necessarily what I believe, but we will be tried by fire. That much is certain.
Well, we can agree on that. We're going to be going through some.
Yeah, it has to get much worse before it can actually get better.
Most people are used to seeing Mad Max type apocalyptic
movies,
and Gray State sort of bridges the gap. How did you get to that point? That's what I was blown away by the trailer that I saw.
Well, hold on. We have a late addition to the Roundtable here with musician Jordan Page, the muse of the movement. And as long as we're on
Dylan of the Ron Paul.
Yeah, there you go. As long as we're on the cultural tip and reaching out to youth, I'd like to give him a chance to say what is the role of music specifically in this context?
Well,
what successes you had?
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That's everybody. And thank you, Adam. It's all about invoking an emotional response. It's like I'm a seed planter. I'm trying to open the doors, and I don't know that I'm the best debater, and I'll leave that to Adam and Stewart,
The master debater.
Debater. But it's just getting people introduced to the concepts, and music is a fairly non-threatening way. Even some of the more hard rock that I do is not as threatening as coming out and saying 9/11 was an inside job. They're not going to want to hear that. I've seen people react really, really negatively to the more hardcore concepts that are huge, not even rabbit holes or dragon holes.
But music takes the defenses down.
Sure, but music kind of opens you up. And I've had people that don't agree with my politics come up to me and tell me that they loved my album. So I just well, thanks very much. But there was a radio guy up in Boston who wanted to. He got my old manager sent him my album. And he loved it. He's like, we're gonna play this all over the Northeast.
And then 2 days later, he called him back and said, "I'm never going to play this album." You know, because he looked me up and saw that I support Ron Paul.
Right.
He loved the album, but he hates Ron Paul. Where's the disconnect there? I mean, mainly, like, one of the big messages I have for people is that they're not alone in this fight, obviously. But it seems that way a lot of the time. I was so naive when I started doing this that I'd never heard of Ron Paul. I didn't know any. I just kind of woke up, just snapped out of my stupor, and I thought I was going to have to start a movement. I didn't have any idea there was a movement that I could just kind of become part of. I mean, I was that disconnected. I think a lot of people are. They're more concerned with their little gadgets and staying isolated while somehow becoming more connected. So
preach to the choir and have fun, and other people will join the choir.
Exactly.
But I think you brought up a very interesting point, and you said about emotional response.
Yeah.
And being an actor, it's interesting when I can talk to people just as a person. People will be open to it or shun. But if I play a character and I present this material through a character, I can get them instantly on that part.
Yeah.
And that's in essence of what we've been striving on. Dave as a writer, as a director, visually he can bring that. But as a character and an actor, bring the vulnerability, and people will just latch onto that right away. They will accept with.
What's the base nature of communication? Is story. We have an appetite for story. I mean, what is a theater apart from gathering together in the dark to listen to a story?
And if you're preaching, you have to appear invulnerable.
Absolutely.
As artists, it's our responsibility to act in our own capacity. Even if it's not running for Congress or actually making the change, we can alert people to the change that needs to be made.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that David brought up the superhero characterization. And I think that what we pretty much all agree on is that it's time to stop having heroes and start being one.
Yeah.
And we got to lead by example. Because I moved down to Madison, Wisconsin, because that's where the action was. And I knew that Kevin Barrett lived down there, and I wanted to be part of it. And when I went down there, I started having meetings and getting out there, doing stuff, bullhorning. I mean, he handed out DVDs. I mean, I'm like, let's go, man, let's do it. And I've had the pleasure and honor of influencing a lot of people, and to me that's what keeps me going.
Yeah.
Because I mean, with all the stuff going around in the world, and you know, I see the ills of society, and it's what gives me my heartbeat back, is to get out there and do it. And I think that if we can create more people like us, I mean, we got a group of people here, you know, if we go out and tell 3 or 4 people and get them going, and then they tell 3 or 4 more people, I mean, we can create a ripple effect. You know, like throwing a pebble in a pond and watching it reach the edge of the pond.
But the message is every man's a hero.
Yeah.
Not, you know, we got to go find our man on the white horse to save us. No. You got to save yourself.
I think one of the concerns that's been underlying this whole conversation is that Ron Paul has pulled a community together. So, I mean, my question is, you know, what I heard before is a lot of the conversation of what happens if Ron Paul doesn't win. You know, there's this huge concern because when we've dealt with these last campaigns for the presidential election, we saw these people coalesce, and it was because of Ron Paul. And there wasn't something there to keep them involved afterwards. It was so difficult to be able to organize, you know, beyond them being a delegate for Ron Paul. And one of the things we're trying to do with this rally today is give people a reason to stay involved here in Minnesota, and especially in our 2nd district. But no one really has that cachet of Ron Paul. And the Ron Paul people are such individualistic, and you know, they even, the Ron Paul people may have an issue with one stance of the Tea Party, and therefore they can't associate with them. Like Israel is one of them. And how do we get beyond that? You know, how do we, you know, we talk about the fear of how to, you know, we talked about the young people, but you know, how do we fill Ron Paul's shoes without taking a huge step backwards? And of course, Ron Paul did all this for 20, 30 years. It's taken him, you know, he fought these fights by himself to get to this point. But how do we get some type of coalition moving forward to where we can rally people?
Let me ask it, because I've been doing that. Every time I talk to somebody and they go, you know, I'm going to vote for Ron Paul. I mean, I'm 52 years old and I was sitting in the convention in LA County, and the guy turned next to me and says, you know, I've been a Democrat for 52 years. I'm changing my registration to vote for this guy, right? And when I tell people it's not about Ron Paul, right? What he's talking about and the principles he's living up to are the same principles that are inside you right now. You would not listen to Ron Paul if you did not have those same principles. Those are your principles.
Let's go before that, but how busy are you getting? Are you getting booked and flying all over? I mean, I've been
November and December this past year were like dead. I had like 7 or 8 shows that just like they just didn't happen. They were going to happen, the funding just dropped out. And then starting January the 1st, everything changed, and I've been like I may have visited all 50 states since then. So, yeah, but it's pretty wild. Yeah.
What I'd like to say on that is now people are being more directly affected. So all of a sudden, people like you that are promoting liberty and freedom through your music and through everything else you can, they're starting to flock to you. So now all of a sudden, that's going to raise your awareness, your environment, your audience incredibly. So that's a way that's going to continue the whole liberty movement is by people streaming right to your message through your music, the message through the movie. You know, the people running through politics, the guys that are standing up for our oaths. You know, our guys put us on networks, everything else. But now the liberty movement, because they're being affected, is getting popular now.
But people don't want this to end. They want it to keep going. People are asking me, "Are you going to keep touring?" I'm like, "Hell yeah, I'm going to keep touring." I've got all kinds of plans to keep touring. You know, and I mean, the Ron Paul cruise is going to be happening in like February. It's that far out. Something like that's coming.
You know, so, yeah. With Jordan, like I really want to make a good point about it. Like Jordan's up here, you know, at the behest of David, you know, to be here for this thing, right? Kurt Bills didn't call him, did he? Did Kurt Bills call you? No. Okay. All these other people that Ron's endorsed, have they called you? I'm trying to make a point here, and I'm just a little bit irked by the way some of that's gone down. I don't know who's so totally involved with those endorsements. It may be someone with a B or something, I don't know, but who knows? But I think it alludes to David's question earlier about this coalition, because as this movement grows, and it's going to, there's no stopping it. I think there's a very real risk of people taking advantage, and those that are not necessarily in the movement because of the same things that we are, but because they see what's happening. And that, you know, I don't know if a litmus test or I don't know if that's a great idea, but some type of understanding that if people are, for example, making deals with people that are establishment flows that have been in for years, like the guy here, Klein, who I ended up running against his protege. I know exactly who the guy is. And people that make deals with someone like that, and people like Jordan, who does not get calls of invites from these other people. I mean, it should show a dividing line between the movement and those that are looking to capitalize on it, per se. And what are they capitalizing on? You know, I think we need to be very...
if I may make a distinction here, it's not just capitalizing on the movement, because in a way we all do, like, and let's be honest about that. It's people that want to take advantage of the movement versus people that want to serve the movement. Like, I want to make my career, I want to make money, I want to make good money by effectively serving the movement as an independent media producer. I'd like to think that doesn't make me a leech, you know, that there's a distinction there, that we can say we are providing legitimate services, and then there are those who are simply, for a different cause, trying to misrepresent themselves in order to show that they're serving the movement when they're really not.
Insincere.
Right, this isn't a knock on your life.
All right.
Unless you make money to sustain life, you cannot affect and serve the movement effectively.
Right. So if you're not, you should be right. You should be. Well, no, we've been I think taught by liberal academia and that whole mentality. Like, if you're doing something political, if you're doing something for society, you need to be selfless. And it's like we're totally turning that on its head. Like, no, we are part of the movement because we believe in our rational self-interest. We believe that we get the most satisfaction out of doing this. And this is the world that we, for ourselves, want to see for our children, not because, we're going to give ourselves to some collective, some imaginary idea. No, it's the opposite of that.
I'd like to go back to what Stewart said. So the number one thing is we can't keep...
We've become part of the board.
But the number 4 thing is we needed money. And what's happening is the people that have been put into somewhat raised into leadership positions are now making deals to get that money, and also under the justification that, well, it's better than the establishment guy getting it. You know, I'll compromise this because it's
lesser of two
Democrat,
evils.
it's better than someone else. And where does that stop? You know, all of a sudden you lost your principle and you're no longer supported.
Yeah.
And it's a very difficult fight to get there, and there's very few people that will be able to walk that line. And I think that's why there's a board leadership and why it's so difficult for people to break out.
You know, for less than $200,000, we can effectively put 168 people on the ballot in California for every congressional district, for every state assembly, and every state senate that's running. Right, for less than 200,000, we can recruit them. Just putting them on the ballot, and they have to go out and get their signatures in their area. That effectively makes change. That means, okay, we're doing the things of actual party. The Republican Party and the Democratic Party are nothing but memberships in reality. They're not really political, government entities. So, and the reason why the Libertarian Party has failed and a few others, I'm going to say failed, right? Because you don't have the growth, right?
Yeah.
We have a growth spurt here, and I guarantee if we take back the GOP will fracture and they'll make another party, right? But right now they have a lot of the money behind them. But we have a collective too. I mean, Ron Paul took about $4 million out of California. What could I do with $4 million for the next 8 years, right? I can run, 168 candidates in every congressional assembly district in there. I can also help people win elections. And that part of their bargain would be, give back to this PAC. Keep the money in your local area, right? Try and keep it in your state. And reach out to other areas that may be already doing well. I mean, if the state of Michigan has all Liberty people elected to office in Congress, well, obviously, that's when we have to start reaching out. But you have to sometimes take care of your own. And that's where the sincerity about it. It's a money thing, and that's what it takes to get that message out there. That's just the vehicle, and Ted can help, and Jordan can help with the music and the art and things like that, but, it costs them money to put this stuff out there and put them on the...
We haven't heard from Luke yet.
That's free.
Luke, you've been probably more events than anybody at this table. And that's definitely not been invited or torched. So you've seen the direct effects of separation from the people in the state.
Like G20.
Firsthand. You've seen how easy it was to kind of get in the beginning. Now you're seeing all the protocol that they're going through to make sure there's security measures to keep the people away from these speakers and the ones in office. What are you seeing going out there?
What do you mean?
Are you seeing it's harder to get in as press, just slashing your press pass and getting in now, or do you have to do a lot more work to get into these events? Because we're part of the regime that's holding them accountable, exposing light in their dark areas they don't want people looking at.
Of course, and it's getting difficult as the more you do and the more prominent you become and the more your name comes out there, the more recognition and the more fear you get, even from everybody, including Rand Paul, who sadly, tries to get sometimes people fired for asking him tough questions, which is a travesty to me.
What happened?
Yeah. This is an important story. It's worth taking the time to at least summarize.
When Rand Paul endorsed Mitt Romney, that was a big question in everybody's mind. Why? Right. I met Rand, and I knew Rand, and I talked to Rand before on camera about the Bilderberg Group, about the New World Order, about Federal Reserve and everything, and right before he became a senator, he was totally on point with everything. And it was on my mind, and I wanted to know exactly why. So I came up to him and I asked him a question. Collaborated with Abby Martin, who works with RT. She had Senate press credential passes and was with that big news organization. So I asked him a couple questions. He wouldn't answer me. I thought he'd maybe try to talk to Abby. After me and Abby did it, the video went viral, got 100,000 views online, and Abby's office got a call from the Senate Media Relations Committee, who was contacted on behalf of Rand Paul, and they pretty much on the phone said, we're going to take away her press credentials and the entire offices of RT's press credentials to the Senate. You should fire her if you want to make this easy on you.
Wow.
And they said they're going to try to press charges of harassment and intimidation on her. So this was a whole big thing, and they made all these accusations against.
So he's using government power to silence them. Wow.
Directed from Rand's office. That's what the Senate Press Relations Committee said. And this is not just one instance. There's other instances of our correspondent being tracked and targeted by police forces because of a video he made exposing the TSA. So you're seeing slowly the people who are questioning that authority are being targeted, are being harassed, or being intimidated. But what you see out of it is when you come out with the stories and when you're out in the open and you won't play politics and the only obligation and the only allegiance you hold is to the truth will prevail. And if something should be destroyed by the truth, I think it might as well damn be, and it should be. And the only way to do that is to hold to that true one principle. And that's why my only principle is to question everything and everybody, and that's the only way to really move forward. I don't have any different, I'm not buying for power, I'm not buying for ideologies. To me, we're in a crisis mood where so much negative energy, so much negativity, so much power is being abused right now, and it's only building up and it's only getting worse. The only really way to do that is to change the way all of the human beings view things and approach things and how they live their own personal lives. So that's my own personal journey, is more of a personal one, more of a spiritual one, of saying, you know, let's stop harping on the negativity, let's stop harping on the power, let's start questioning everything, including ourselves. We make mistakes, we have our faults as well, but the only true allegiance you can have is to questioning everything.
Well, then let me suggest a different perspective if you want to avoid the negativity of one that I've been preaching from my podcast lately and from my apartment studios, where I'm talking about the future as as something that we are working towards as a part of an evolutionary process that's a positive thing, that we are looking towards a voluntary society, and everything that we see around us, you say that there's an increase in the negativity. I think that's really relatively superficial. What you see around us today as increased negativity is really, in a way, government in its death throes. You know, it's even if you don't want to say it's the concept of government itself in its death throes, because people are evolving past needing this necessary evil, there are death throes of the current system. There are people acting desperately as power is going away from them because it is being returned to the people, if only because certain elements of the system, certain functions, certain departments are becoming unfeasible. You know, they're just not like the Federal Reserve, the course of a fiat currency running its path, you know, like running its course and coming to a crash, coming to hyperinflation. Like, we can see that happen. We see everybody who benefits from that saying, let's get our last licks in. And what I'm preaching as the message, you know, my version of the message, is that with technology, with increases in productivity, with all of the ability that gives us towards enlightenment, the fact that going from a state of nature where everybody had to be a hunter and gatherer for 16 hours a day to survive, roughly speaking, compared to today, where people have the leisure time to simply consider these issues, to look outside of their immediate circumstance, to use the internet, is moving us forward to this voluntary society. And I tell you what's really turned me on recently is seeing the kind of youth response to that message. And I have been getting emails from teens. I got an email the other day from someone who said, I've been listening to you for years. I love your message, especially what you're doing now. And by the way, I'm about to start middle school. Do you have any advice? I'm like, holy crap! You know, and I don't mean to, like, in a way, I do want to brag here because I want to share this, especially with this group. You want to talk about reaching younger? That one email was the exception. But I'm getting a lot from people in high school who are saying, holy crap, what am I surrounded by, Adam? Like, tell me that something better is coming, and being able to offer that and provide that and show a way to that is inspiring more people to be involved and embrace that as a positive message.
But there's two effects to that brutality, to that negativity, to that oppression. There's the death throes. There's one person who's going to be like, holy crap, I'm afraid, I don't want to get involved, I don't want to lose my job, I don't want to get trapped by police, I don't want to get arrested, I don't want to get intimidated. And then there's the other people who says, I don't give a damn. Do what you want to me. I'm going to live my life the way I'm going to live my life. And to me, my own spiritual journey is encouraging that kind of realm of thought of saying, I don't care what you're going to do to me, because at the end of the day, I know I lived my life to the fullest and I did what I wanted to. So I think my whole thing is showing people, look, don't be afraid. What can they do to you?
But you're differentiating that as a matter of personality. Like, some types do this, some types do that, and that's true. That's and my background's in psychology, so I definitely appreciate that analysis. But does everybody here know the story of Roger Pion, P-I-O-N, who in Vermont decided he'd had enough? And this is a matter of changing circumstance, not simply a change in personality. This is a guy who was harassed by the local police force for years as a farmer, for local regulations, for all sorts of bullshit crimes, for finally marijuana possession and resisting arrest. And we all know how much bullshit most resisting arrest charges are. And he decided he was going to take his tractor and run over 7 police cruisers and destroy them. And it's not that he said, well, now it's justified because they did something bad and I'm justified in destroying this property because they are using it to oppress people. He simply, for him, it was that the equation changed. And I think, just for the record here, we are absolutely justified the same way if you saw someone about to shoot somebody, you are as justified taking the gun out of their hands as you are destroying police property. Because we know that the police force does not exist to protect us. It has a net negative effect on public safety and all of those other problems that come with it. And if someone is using police, law enforcement resources to oppress people, yes, hypothetically, morally speaking, you are justified in destroying that property. However, for most Americans, when you do that, guess what? The consequences are still a lot worse because the mainstream, the momentum of the bureaucratic momentum of society disagrees with you. Your circumstance gets worse if you take a tractor and run over 7 police cruisers. In the case of Roger Peon, he said, you know what? These guys are fucking with me anyways. It doesn't matter. I might as well take, if they want to send me to jail for all this other bullshit that they're drumming up on me, they're going to send me to jail. Might as well take out some of their ability to fuck with some other people on my way out. And that's the key difference. And I talk about who we are as a movement in terms of not being the high school, captain of the football squad and the cheerleading squad and the student body president. No, I mean, look at who we are. We are, and to really crudely summarize and collectivize this movement of individualists, we're the misfits, the punks. We're the ones that, the people that are going to be the first to question the system aren't going to be the ones that are treated really well by the system. The first of all, it's the INTJ personality types, it's the outcasts, it's the, for lack of a better term, the downtrodden victims of government. And guess what? There are a lot more victims of government today than there ever have been because the government racket is getting beyond itself. It's getting into that death row where it's like, well, we're just going to victimize everybody. Whereas before it was, well, if we victimize a few people and we convince everybody else it's for their own good, then they'll go with it. But in order to keep the system going, they've had to keep victimizing more and more people. Right. And now enough people are seeing themselves as victims of government. And I don't want to promote victimhood here, but they're seeing very simply that the net impact of government on their lives is not a net positive.
Well, it's like the lead up to the American Revolution. It was that long train of abuses that got a lot of people off the fence, but it was also an ideological consciousness shift. And you can also tie it, you can also say another analogy is the fall of the Berlin Wall and the fall of communism. I mean, here's this uber state, East Germany and the Stasi and the secret police. You have these, huge towers like the Panopticon watching you every day. But it was really a paper tiger in the end. Once there was enough of a shift in the consciousness of the people, including inside the military, the mass demonstrations and the military stood down and they were done. So that's what we're kind of working towards and growing that consciousness. And whenever they do anything to react to us, try to shut us down, it just grows it even more. So we're like a good virus or a good cancer, I guess.
Well, Luke said it best. And, he says, I'd rather speak the truth and destroy that. Jesus said it well. He says, you should know the truth, and the truth should set you free. It also means it sets you free from not only the truth that we're seeing happening outside of ourselves, but it also wipes away our delusions as well.
Well, yeah, you can't live in fear, like he was saying. Like, I know your family history. Your dad was a dissident against communism in Poland. So your personal family history, you can't be a compromiser who sits down and shuts up, right? But the message is that everybody else should be the same way, right?
My message is everybody has their own path. They should all go where they want.
But they should do it with courage.
What Adam said, with so many people being victimized, whether it's with police brutality or economically, I'm kind of worried as well to where we're going to be going. I mean, what Roger Peon did, awesome, amazing, great, uplifting story for everybody else. But really the consequences is where the taxpayers are still going to have to pay for those police cars. He's going to go to jail. He's going to have to, he's going to face some very serious charges.
For that,
and I'm
argument
worried.
Made specifically, the taxpayers save more money by not having to put people for victimless crimes through the court system
of course,
than they do replacing police cars every now and then.
Okay, of course, we know that. But all I'm saying is I'm also worried about where the path we're going. Because, reacting negatively to a negative thing only widens the gap between the police officers and the regular people and makes the police officers hate us more
Wait,
because
is it
we
a
take
negative
retributional
reaction to
action.
smack a gun out of someone's hands right before they shoot someone? Is that a negative reaction?
I'm coming more from the Gandhi and Martin Luther King aspect of it, because I know if we do try to smack that gun, or if we do try to bring a gun to a gun, we're outgunned. We're rarely ungunned. I mean, the technology and the weaponry that they have, and I don't have faith in doing that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be in an armed conflict or a physical conflict with the state. I think there's other means and ways of showing their wrongs and changing the systems that I think worked throughout history somewhat because of circumstances. That's something I've been debating very toughly at Occupy Wall Street. At Occupy Wall Street, because a lot of the people down there are like, we should destroy stuff, and I'm like, no, you don't do anything when you do destroy stuff. And
well, it's what you destroy and why, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, any destruction of something of value is in and of itself a negative thing. But if you apply the proper moral process to it, and you say,
what would be an example of that?
Like if you're destroying a bank, like I don't know what Occupy Wall Streeters want to destroy. If you're destroying corporate resources, because you don't like someone making money when they're providing something that people want to consume, all you're doing is destroying productive resources. But if you're destroying something that is only being used for destruction or to harm people,
like the cameras, like the traffic cameras in England that are being burned out. That's a good example.
In our city, we actually just dealt, I mentioned this before, we dealt a really big blow to traffic cameras. Because in Iowa, most of the other major cities have gotten them in the last year. And in our city, it was supposed to be the next one, and we actually got the city council last week to vote 7-0 to table it indefinitely. And what we did was we didn't destroy the physical cameras, obviously. We destroyed the idea. Because if you destroy a bank, right, the people that still believe in that are going to build it up the next week, and, they'll be none the wiser. They'll just keep moving along.
And only enforce their bravado of what they wanted to do.
They will use it as an excuse to call us the uncivilized, like this is what happened. I talked to everybody when we were doing it. We did demonstrations. We also went out and demonstrated in front of the city council people's houses that needed to vote. And we were respectful and held signs, and the holding signs thing, it worked. But anyway, and we did all that. But what I told them, the battle here is not these people in office per se. Because us individually, we're not going to change their minds. Most of them are principled. Every time we talk to them, and it's on camera because it's recorded and it's on public access, we're talking to all the other people in the city. And there's a game that they play. And I don't know if this is the same in all cities, but in ours, it's a game of civility. Whoever comes off as the more respectable, for example, like this suit. I wear this all the time when I'm doing that stuff. Now, granted, I prefer jeans and t-shirts, but they have this, I don't know if you want to call it like brainwash mentality. When they see something else clicks, and they're like, oh, I'm listening to you on a different level, And then when you talk to them, and the mayor and the city council look like the tyrants because it's about perception. They know this. They know that everything they do is a perception war. If they win the perception war, our greatest enemy is also our greatest ally. Our greatest enemy is the people and their sheepish ways. They generally won't do anything unless there's a group that's, active. But because of that, when we're active and we win the perception war, they go our way. So now, granted, I'd like everybody to be individualistic and strong, but that's just not what it is right now. So once we realize that, we win the perception war, which is beating them at their own game. Their own game is trying to be. They always try to seem that they're the persons that are the most civil and they have all the answers. We're just a bunch of rabble rousers that want to go back 200 years. All that kind of stuff. And when they realize, hey, actually, we do care, quote unquote, about safety and all this other stuff, we really think that our method will deliver the best long-term results. And then they say, oh, well, I'm open to listen. And in our city, that's what's been very helpful, and actually in the eastern part of Iowa. And I hope that when people think about like destruction, and now granted, I do have my own personal qualms with allowing a police officer to be abusive, to say the least. We just had that happen last week in our city, first time ever. It's a big news story right now of a young lady, 29 years old, relatively young, had 5 officers come to her house and basically strip search her for a library fine that she'd already paid. Yeah, and it's huge news in Dubuque right now.
Wow, male officers?
Nope.
Female officers?
Well, there was one female officer there. And yeah, all the other guys, it's a big deal because it obviously broke protocol even for them. And it, you know, as sad as it is, it ironically helps us to prove our point because it woke up even people that don't necessarily fight the system and be like, wow, something's wrong here. You know, they're really out of line. And so now we're using this to obviously push on other issues. Every time there's an issue that most people can agree on, like a red light camera, where there were polls done in Dubuque, 80% of residents were against it. Chamber of Commerce did a poll last week, 72.3% against it. That's an issue that everybody was agreeing on, but they weren't all initially like that. We went out and we said, hey, this is a revenue raising thing. It's not about safety. We made the argument. If we went out there and started pulling cameras down and whatnot, they'd be like vandals and, you know, whatnot. And now, granted, would we be justified? Yeah, I don't want to be on camera. It's none of their business, you know. But would it have won the argument? Would it have won the day? Probably not. You know. So there's a time and a place, and I think for some people they have to draw their own line. For me, I still think we have a chance to push things back, at least locally. I don't know about federally, but locally to make to insulate your city. To basically make this what I'm trying to do in ours. We're going to get a majority in the city council within 3 years. We've already got candidates. We're going to be fine, I'll say it on camera, I don't care. We're going to be removing the corporate charters from the police station and the lower courts. A lot of people don't know how that works. When you have corporate charters on it, their incentive is not quote-unquote safety or upholding the law. They're upholding code. It's very different. That's why when they're saying they always cite code to you, not necessarily the law, because they're operating under something completely different. You take away their corporate charter, the police station will have to either reorganize, which would take a whole lot of time, and they'll just have to disappear. Now, would that give it to law enforcement? No, you still have the sheriff and the sheriff deputy. The difference is the sheriff's actually elected. The chief of police is not. Chief of police, you have to go through the city council, and then you have to go through the police union, which is why they're basically a paramilitary force at this point. They have buzz haircuts. Anybody ever seen them? Buzz haircuts, military bearing, crisp uniform, military rank, and now they have military hardware. How are we not occupied by a paramilitary force? Which is why they're becoming the next one on my radar after the red light camera is dealing with the poison movement. Because it's not just that there's a few bad apples and stuff like that. And granted, there are other people that naively think that they're there to serve the public for some law enforcement purpose. It's the function. They're there because of an ordinance purpose, not because of a law purpose. Because in reality, you have a sheriff's department for that. So I think getting other cities to realize this information and to be, okay, we're going to win the perception war. We're going to be the ones that are actually looking out for people, especially as bad as it is, the economy right now, it's a gift to us. Because with the bad economic times, people are starting to ask questions. Wait a minute, why are they taking another $80 out of my check for running some red light that I didn't run, and they know that I'm not going to spend a day to go down there and fight it. How is it that I have to pay X, Y, and Z when it's hard to have ends meet? Now they're starting to be open to question. This is one of the only times we're going to be able to effectively make our case. Because when things come down, people are going to accept one or the other. They're either going to accept those that are obviously currently in power, saying, you just didn't give us enough of your power so we could fix this. Or they're going to accept the notion from the people that were saying it all along in a civilized yet forceful and passionate manner, hey, this is what this road leads to. We're going to be here when everything comes down. And that's in our city and also in Iowa what I've been trying to do specifically. Because now granted, I'd like to fight the gray state idea, okay, as much as possible. And so I'm hoping to prove you wrong, to be honest.
Well, you don't know what his whole scenario is.
Let's close out here with where do we go from here after the political system is kind of going to be harder to infiltrate.
Well, I look at it like I was on Alex Jones' show and we had a pretty good discussion after the NDAA passed, and I look at it like this: is that there's a window opening when we have an economic collapse. We got an economic crisis and a constitutional crisis coming to a head. It's going to come to a head. We're going to be going through some shit, but it's a two-way window. They're going to try to capitalize on it to give us what their vision for what's next is a global Fed and even more power. And it's a constant centralization of power being stripped from the people, being stripped from the communities, being stripped from the states and centralized, and then internationalized. That's their plan. And so, but it's a two-way window for us though. Chaos can be a two-way window we can take advantage of that. If we just sit on our asses or fade back into the woodwork after Ron Paul's campaign is dead, then they'll win by default. Because when everybody's panicking and freaking out when the dollar crashes, they'll be like, oh, here you go, here's your salvation. So we got to offer an alternative, like we've been talking about already. And I think a big part of the message is that each individual person has to be responsible for themselves and have the courage, like Luke said, you got to act courageously. And I agree, walk your own path, but we have an obligation to our children, an obligation to each other to take care of each other. So I think, like the Aurora shooting, I think in some ways was a good eye-opener. You can't rely on professional warriors to take care of you. We're all supposed to be warriors. And that's going back to just the core identity of what a human being is. In a tribe, every man's a warrior, right? There's not a special little warrior class that handles the lion attacking the women and children. Everybody does it. Every guy grabs a fucking spear and charges the lion. And so we've gotten away from that core, what it means to be a human being. So I think the message to me is to look, guys, look at the fundamental responsibilities of being a human being. Don't rely on professional police. We didn't have professional police when this country was founded. The sheriff would have a posse made up of the average citizen. So, and I tell them, look, like when we go talk to veterans, say, we're going to be going through some crap. Your police is going to be fired eventually, or they won't have any money to pay them. So you guys are going to have to be responsible to be a security in your own community. And so that's what I tell people is get ready for the crash and focus on your local community and not just politics, making sure that you've got food, commo, everything else you're going to need, and security as a community to take care of yourselves. Not the isolated prepper who's afraid to let anybody know he has food. That's not going to work. And politics is a part of that, but I think that it goes way beyond politics. It's just get back to being responsible for yourselves and each other.
Going off what Stewart said, Robert Lyman said specialization is for insects. We're all responsible for our own everything. We've kind of delegated those responsibilities to others that we consider authorities, like you're wearing a suit, like you said. So I'm going to respect what you say a lot more than if you weren't. You could try doing a British accent, that might help as well. That stuff works. I think
you can pull it off.
The second we all consider ourselves our own experts, not out of arrogance, but out of our own research and everything, I think that's where we should go.
I think a key thing is community at this level too. I mean, the fact that we came together and are talking, I've just seen such division, even between the groups that are really dedicated to reforming the government and the country, that they're not able to get together and coalesce and create that solidarity. And I mean, this is something I really, appreciate that Will has kind of offered the olive branch up, and he's tried to reach out, and provide some of his cachet up into Minnesota, because he sees that we have somewhat of a void of leadership. We've had people support Ron Paul, but there's no one that's been able to coalesce the troops up here. And us having these kind of meetings and getting together and trying to get the issues out there with some solidarity is just so important in going forward, because it's going to be so difficult to replace that ability of Ron Paul to pull people together and focus towards a cause.
And what we've been doing and with our Central Committee members is making sure that what the political parties are not doing now is that they want all their votes when it comes around election day. They come swooping down with their signs. But also we've been calling them and saying, look, here's your person that's in your assembly district or in your precinct. Here's your contact. If you have an issue or you want to talk to them, and also, get together. Like yesterday, we went to a nice get-together of the community and get together with people every once in a while. Do a month-to-month thing, a little barbecue, or just maybe come over and just talk or have a movie night. So it's getting back involved with our communities. We're isolated. Come on, guys. I know you do this. You got a neighbor next door, and the only time you actually really interact with is when you see him and you go, and you get into your house, right? So we've become that thing that we don't want to be. We're not a community anymore. We're a bunch of individuals, and we live in isolation. We become a community online. You see the kids with the texting. They sit in the same room. They're texting each other. So, I mean, communication and life, but it's going to have to get back to that, actually interacting with each other like we're doing now, and continue with it.
Yeah, one thing we should keep in mind, I think, because we're wrapping this up, is this is a rare opportunity that all of us are here together at once. I'd be honest, I've wanted to meet a lot of you guys. I've been we know each other, but I've wanted to meet a lot of you guys for a while now. Okay, so I'm a gushing fan of many, to be honest. Okay, just put that out there. Well, yeah, and some of you guys are actually in it. But since all of us have different talents, I mean, really, we've got quite a gamut here. We've got a musician, we've got talk show.
Don't look at me like I got talent. What are you talking about?
You do. Get to gab.
We got the talent. Right? We've got audio visual. We've got all kinds of talent here, political to issues. Because we all have different talents, I think from this point on we should make ourselves available to each other. Whatever talent we have. Like if, for example, there's a big issue going on in your state, and you're like, man, I could really use. I've got X, Y, and Z people that are willing to, I have people that are willing to fund something. They have no idea how to do it. They got money, but they got no concept.
Oh, we can help with that.
Okay. So,
they got a movie they can fund tours.
But you see what I mean,
Billboards,
book deals.
Well, we've got all kinds of stuff, and together we're a lot stronger than when we're by ourselves in other places and wondering. I'm struggling by myself. It's such a big fight. There's so many sheeple out there. I think from here on, we need to somehow make each other more available to each other.
Ted, I'll just keep producing the talk radio shows I do and just get it out there. I can tell you, Ron Paul goes away, this isn't ending. Ron Paul was just a regular guy in the 1970s, but he had conviction, he kept going at it, and he became the tip of the spear politically.
He was tireless.
For this movement. Plenty of people that are here just like Ron Paul put 100,000 YouTube video views back in the 1970s. He wouldn't even make them. But the people that were behind it, this is it. This movement will keep going. Now, the organization, like the Republican Party here, the next time around, I'm just not sure. But it doesn't matter. It's all about education. It's about winning the minds. That's what we need to do. Keep educating, keep pushing forward. Change the minds of people that the politicians will follow.
Yep. I think the best way to make people aware is instead of changing people, to make them question things themselves. And just by asking the questions and not making statements, people will come to the conclusion of the truth by that way, and that's the only real way to come to that point of view. And we all have our own paths and we all have our own ways. The only thing that I would recommend is people not to listen to one man or one ideology, and to always believe in themselves and to question everything, including themselves. And it's the beginning, and it will lead you to the truth. And that's the only thing that is really more important than a campaign or a man or a movement. It's just that.
I think one of the key things that we could focus on as well is shattering the paradigms that are placed before us, the terminologies used. We're whack jobs, we're conspiracy theorists because we have a different viewpoint. We need to redefine what it means to take a stance and to be the one person who thinks differently and thinks outside of the box without being given these specific labels and demonized publicly. So I think that that's what I'm working on a film right now called Truther, and that's my main specific goal, because we've all heard the same information before. I'm not going to sit here and try to explain everything from A to Z, but what I want to do is I want to shatter those mentalities and to get people to think differently or to look at the world through a different perspective. And to me, that's the foot in the door. And then once they start waking up, then they can do their own research and formulate their own opinions.
I always try and be authentic and tell them that I'm no one special, and you can do the same thing I'm doing, and I'm willing to teach you, which means I'm taking my experience and all of my mistakes, and I'm giving you my wisdom so you don't have to make the same mistakes I did. All right? And so just be authentic and tell them that you're not powerless. You're not alone. And that's where we're going to have to, like I said, we're not powerless and we're not alone.
I would just say be a man of your word and live true to yourself and just hold yourself accountable, because it reflects upon the movement if you don't uphold what you say you're going to do. And I've noticed that with a lot of people, that it really hurts us. So accountability and just be a man of your word. So
I'd like to echo what Stewart was talking about a little bit, in that all of us are warriors, and all of us need to be at in our communities, connected with other people that have similar minds, or even people that don't have similar minds. I'm pretty convinced, and a lot of people are, that this economic collapse is coming, and it's planned out. It's going to happen. The question is, if as they get more and more desperate, the power people, and they see more and more of us basically telling them that what they're doing is not working, how desperate will they get? Would they put off an EMP over this country and kill 200 million people? The fact of it is we need to help defend our own areas, our own local. We need to be able to grow food, provide our own protection, get other people in our community that'll protect our small communities, our neighbors, and try and turn on as many people to the ideas that are being talked about here. And the ideas of freedom, and that we want to have our own independent views and not be pushed around by a globalist government or a government of the United States that are basically collapsing this thing so that they can put us all under their boot. It's happened before. We've seen it with Stalin and Hitler. And are we going to get to that point in this country, or will we make enough difference in our own communities to stop what's going on right now?
Well, I think, the only thing that keeps me going over the last 3 years has been the Ron Paul movement, seeing that consciousness shift. Like I said earlier, once they wake up, that's it. And so I don't think it's going to go like Nazi Germany. It's going to be more like 1776 America than 1934 Germany. And we might have to fight. And I hope we have a totally peaceful resolution. I hope it's like East Germany, where the beast just falls apart. But there's also the alternative, which means we'll have to fight. And we should be emotionally and spiritually prepared for both. And, work for the peaceful resolution, Gandhi-like outcome if we can get that, but also be willing to be Patrick Henry if we have to.
If I was going to leave any thoughts here, it would be what we're doing now is not new. It's been done for a long time in varying forms. Hopefully, I think we have a better head start because we had a decent example a few hundred years ago. And what we're doing right now is it's a rather significant undertaking, and I think those that want to be as involved as they think they want to be, I think they need to be ready for some of the sacrifices that are going to have to happen. I'm going to try to prevent as much of that as possible, to be honest. Obviously, I'm going mostly the political route, but realistic to know that we've been trying for a while. So I still don't think that we're quite there. We have to give up hope on everything. And I think that some things may be able to happen, especially in the next month. Allow me that optimism. Thank you. But ultimately, we are doing what others before us have done, and we need to keep that level of gravity when we're doing it. Yeah, I'm just really glad to meet everybody.
I'm just going to add a little bit to what Ted said because I think it was really crucial. And what's important to me is for people to know that we're not going anywhere. And the establishment is hoping that in 2014 we're not going to be able to rally support and we're going to go back to the old ways. And the people out there that have been involved on the fringes with supporting because they've been able to align themselves with Ron Paul also aren't sure what the next step is and how we're going to pull together. And I respect the people in here so much because they have stuck with this movement and have been part of leading the Liberty movement. And I want to announce that this rally for freedom in Minnesota is important because it is the first annual rally for freedom in Minnesota. We're going to let people know today that we're going to be here every year. It's going to get bigger and better every year. They're going to know that we're not going anywhere and that we're going to make some change here in Minnesota and take back this country.
Well, I guess I would say that the idea of truth will never die no matter what. So, and that comes along just knowing who you are, being self-aware. That's the biggest thing. The biggest thing what I take too. And hopefully it doesn't have to get to the point where we have to defend our homeland, but we've been down that course before. And we know that we probably will if we have to. But I think just being aware of who we are, finding that internal strength will carry this to the next end. But tell you what, goddamn, it's the most exciting time to be alive though.
Interesting times.
It is.
Well, I think our founding fathers were equally as stratified and diverse in their opinions as we are today. I think they overcame those challenges at a meeting of the minds, and they created one of the most successful attempts at freedom that we've ever seen in history. Now, I think we all need to act in our own capacities to reinvigorate those ideas and reintroduce that conversation on the public scale, because that's something we're not really seeing in politics anymore. It's all just, how little can we compromise? You know, how can we slow the descent? We can reverse the descent if it's possible. I don't mean to contradict David. I'll do it innocuously, I suppose, but we might not always be here. We might not be here tomorrow. We might be in prison for these beliefs in a couple of years. So let's all work within our own capacities to prevent something like that happening. So let's prove David right, hopefully, that we're not going anywhere.
For me, it's two things. One, when I first started this, I had the wrong idea about a whole lot of stuff. It seemed right, but I had it all wrong. And thanks to like friends like Stewart and Adam and like Ernie Hancock, you know, like you guys kind of like helped me to, you know, do the shift that I needed to do in order to like actually accomplish anything.
Just filling in the blanks.
Yeah. Well, no, someone said, I remember it's Stewart, I'm not sure who said it, that, you know, you have these morals inside of you, you have these principles inside of you, that's why the message of liberty just sounds so deep.
Luke that said that.
It was Luke that said that? You know, like, that's very true in my life, because I always had these principles, but I had no way to vocalize them, or no cause to, you know, set them in motion to affect anything really positive until this movement happened to me the way like a car accident happens to you, you know? And, but it, you know, changed my life forever. And so instead of like trying to convince people of an agenda or something, I'm just trying to help them to get their minds free, you know, right? I mean, that's pretty much like where it all has to start. The real revolution starts with the individual soul, you know? And like, I don't quote the Bible by just as a rule, but there's one little spot where it's like 2 Corinthians chapter 3 verse 17, it says, where the Spirit of God is, there is liberty. And that summarizes it all for me, you know, because when the human being is free to achieve its full potential, you know, that is where love and brotherhood really blossom, really shine. That's where we all need to be.
I think there's one part of this conversation that's been missing, which is an appreciation for how technology has gotten us to this very unique point in history. And we see the application of Moore's Law, we see the much broader historical trend of all human productivity following an exponential growth curve. And we are here at the cusp of something amazing as all of these exponential growth curves start to hit these vertical asymptotes. And the idea that we have a profusion of technology around us that allows us to have this kind of conversation to begin with is like, oh my gosh, look, we've got cameras and microphones and laptops, and we've got a computer in my pocket that used to take an entire building to house, and like, holy crap. And here's the thing that I think we're failing to acknowledge in general in the conversation about liberty and social evolution that's happening as a result of this. As fast as it is now with technological development, guess what? It's accelerating. And we're coming upon the technological singularity that a lot of technophiles will say is the big deal, right? When you have a computer that's smarter than a human brain, who cares about how smart the average human brain is? It's going to become irrelevant when we have computers that are way smarter than that, just 10 years after we have the one that's as smart as a human brain. And all of this stuff, to me, it's like we are experiencing the end of the evolutionary phase where fear and uncertainty and tribalism and lack of self-confidence, downward social comparison, you know, as the psychological soil that statism grows out of, they're all going away because of this technological empowerment. Now, I have a belief that government, in and of itself, is a pathological behavior. It's not something that exists. It's not just the institution. It is something that is given vibrance because it's something that we as a society do. And it is fundamentally pathological to say someone should be in charge of everybody else. Or if we have the majority, we can impose our will by force on the minority. That's pathological behavior. And I had this fantasy once that all of a sudden there's going to be this phase in human evolution where we all get therapy robots. And everybody gets, and then I go, wait a second. You look at what's happening on the internet, the way that people are coming together, the leisure time that we have to examine these things, to read Dr. Spock, to raise our children without hitting them because we realize that that produces better children. All of these things, it's like they're coming anyways. And all that we can do as individuals is decide what side of this we're going to be on. And to me, that's my faith, that we are advancing towards a voluntary society and we are going to get there. And being a part of this and being able to see this is what motivates and inspires me. It has nothing to do with politics or with any individual people or politicians or government or activism or anything like that. To me, this is the course of human progress. And it's just, as I think has been appreciated very much in this conversation, it is a very, very exciting time to be alive. So go team people.
I just want to say I can't wait for the lobbyists to come try confronting us on a vague calling us committing the Logan Act, because we're getting together here trying to change government, or, better ways for everybody. But let's get out of here.
All right.